Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Deb Talks podcast. And today we have a great person with us, Marie Martin. And I'm so excited. Thank you, Marie, for making the time to spend with us here and to help us a little bit understand better. The topic we're going to talk today about is intergenerational repatterning. So Marie she has lots and lots of experience in the field of health and wellness. And she's also a licensed and registered professional counselor. But we're going to be quite general today and just allow her to take us through her journey and what brought her to be passionate about what she's doing now, which is this intergenerational repatterning facilitating, I think, that she does for people and how it's helping people. So yeah, without further ado, Marie, introduce yourself to us.
Hey, thanks for having me here. It's really kind of exciting to see people gathering again. I feel like there's this whole wave of people like getting back together and gathering and having events and things. It's kind of cool. It's nice to be feeling social again.
Yeah, after those 2 years of lockdowns, we're all happy to be having a human experience.
Yeah, I feel it. Yeah. So my journey, like, how did it start? I guess it started with my own experience, or it usually does. I got to a place where I was pretty sick. I had adrenal fatigue and hypothyroidism so bad I couldn't lift my head off the sofa after 5 o'clock at night. And I was in such a terrible pattern. Like, I'd get to that time of night and I'd just be exhausted and wake up the next morning and drag myself out of bed and drag myself through the day. And for all intents and purposes, like, I looked like I was having a great life and I was a really positive person. But I had this sickness that was dragging me down, and I couldn't understand it and couldn't really understand what was happening around it. So when I finally got diagnosed with hypothyroidism, I had to make a choice. And one morning I woke up and I was like, I'm not going to survive this. Like, I just had this thought of like, I'm going to die. I'm not going to survive this. This is just not, I can't live my life this way. And in that moment I chose to live. And I didn't actually realize like I had to make a choice, and it was almost like a light bulb moment. It was like, oh, I get to choose. I have to like choose, like actively like step into this and say, I choose to live. I choose life. And from that moment, things started like changing. Like, I started going through a process of like learning this modality that eventually took me through my own healing. That I eventually wrote a book about, the Metatrans Code, where I was taught, like, first of all, to look at the mental body and look at the thoughts. So I registered as an NLP practitioner, and I did my practitioner training, and I spent an entire year just like looking at my own thoughts and what's going on in my own thoughts, and like, where these thoughts come from. And I was pretty shocked because I was a really positive person, but I was quite shocked at the amount of thoughts that were in there that I hadn't paid attention to, that I didn't realize, and they were quite toxic, some of them.
That's true. Now, that's funny that you said that you thought you were a positive person. What made you think you were a positive person? Is that maybe in your actions or interactions with others? Because obviously with your thinking process, if it's not good within your thoughts, and you're not being kind to yourself, because ultimately you're the one that's thinking those thoughts. So what does that look like, that you thought you were quite a positive person?
Yeah, well, I thought I was living my life the way that we should live our life, right? I was doing all the things.
Got you. Society.
Living on a ski resort.
I've got the house, I've got the kids, I have the husband, I have the car, maybe a boat.
Doing all the things that we should be doing, right? And I would, surface level, I was pretty happy. Like, I wasn't like the surface level, but there was always something missing underneath.
Okay.
So when I found out about the hypothyroidism, like, the doctor said to me, you will be sick for the rest of your life and you'll be on medication for the rest of your life. And I said, I don't think so. And he went, he said, well, this is not an illness that you get over, it's a lifelong illness, so you better believe it. And I said, I said, that's your belief system, it's not mine, I choose not to keep that. And he was like, oh, you one of those, are you? And I said, I'm one of those.
Yeah.
So I started looking at the beliefs around hypothyroidism and the beliefs around adrenal fatigue, and I started paying attention to my familiar line, and called my mom and said, like, where is there a pattern of hypothyroidism? And she was like, oh, this cousin, that cousin, your grandma. And I was like, oh, there's clearly something's in our generation. But like, I believe in Dr. Bruce Lipton's work, where he said it's not actually a genetic Most of the times it's not genetic diseases, it's epigenetics, it's the belief around the disease that creates the disease. And we pick these up from our family line through learned behavior and cellular memory. And
also what we hear them say, like the talk, we just take it, because when we're in our first formative years, in the first 6 years of our life, there's no filters. Everything just comes through.
Right.
So unconsciously we're taking it on.
Totally. It is from the age of 0. It's like literally 0 to 7. It's like
exactly
90% of our programming. And it's when we're in vitro. Like, so when our mothers are in our grandmother's belly, she already has all the eggs, all the cells that will produce all the eggs of her lifetime. So there's 3 generations in that one body. You know, like, how can we not take on the beliefs that are
Can you repeat that again? That was very fast when you said that. I was like, oh my God. Okay, say that again slowly.
When our mothers are in our grandmother's belly, our mothers.
So that's my mother when she's in utero.
Yeah, she already has all of the cells that will produce all of her eggs.
The eggs that's going to have like me and all my siblings.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ultimately, there's like 3 generations in one body at that time.
Yeah, because it's her mother, her, and us. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Wow, that's phenomenal.
Right?
I'm loving this already.
So we're so entangled in this web of beliefs and thoughts and things of constraints. And then, of course, like, our mothers are brought up by our mothers and they take on the learned behavior. And then I feel like every generation gets a little bit better. And I feel like our generation is the generation that's kind of like super powered.
We're cutting the cords. We're cutting the cords.
Yeah. And we're doing it quickly. I feel like we're here to go, okay, it's time to heal. It's like my mom says to me, oh, we didn't need counselors in our day. I don't know what's going on with these generations. We didn't need counselors. And I'm like, yeah, that's because, like, you lifted the rug, you swept all the shit underneath it, you plastered down the rug. Then you nailed it down with hammer.
Just because people didn't really talk about it doesn't mean it didn't exist.
Right. Yeah. Then you put boards on top of it, and then you put a big sideboard on top of that.
Yes. And also, I think perhaps a generation or two before us, people had to work. Like, you had to work the fields to eat. If you didn't work, you're not going to eat. Like, you had to go hunt. If you didn't hunt, you didn't eat. And I think as we got, to our age, and even our children, they don't have to hunt to eat. They go to the store. Right. And so I think that there was less, I guess, less worry about survival, and we had more time to think about our shit.
Yeah, exactly. Like our parents didn't have a choice. They didn't have.
No, they had to work. Yeah. There was no time to think about, I'm depressed, I have to go make the food, I have to go get the potatoes. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And when survival is all that we've got to think about, then we're in that mode, and we don't have the luxury of having the time and the choice to dig a little bit deeper.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Like, I did a trust journey where I did a solo hike for 180 kilometers, and it was really interesting to play with my thoughts on that 180 kilometers, because I literally had everything that I needed on my back. So I had the food, the water, and the shelter, and it was really like eye-opening to be in that space and go, everything I need is here. I don't need anything else. So there was no cellular coverage, there was no phones, there was no computers, there was no house, there was no car, there was no civilization. It took me 3 days to walk back to civilization. And it really, like, hyper-focused on what we actually need. And what I actually needed was the shelter that was on my back, and the food that I had, and my filter to get water from the lake, and that was it.
We need so very little.
Yeah, and when we reduce it down to what we actually need, and then we see what we're actually consumed by, it doesn't really make any sense of where we get consumed by sometimes.
Yeah, I often think of that, like, you have this whole house and you have so much food in the cupboards, and it's like, you can't even eat the food in a year sometimes what you have in your cupboards. It's like, I don't understand, where is this all coming from? Because before, obviously, like 100 years ago, people didn't have that. You waited for the harvest, you get so much food, you have to pack away so much food for the winter months and so on. And now that we have all this technology where we can, do a lot, but I think that we have so much that it's wasted.
Yeah, we have so much yet so little, right? It's at the same time we're missing out on the things that we really actually need, like the nutrients and the real food. And like I know, like when I was a kid, we didn't have supermarkets, like and it sounds ridiculous, but we didn't. We had local shops, and we went to the butchers and the bakers and
us too. And I still do that a little bit. I do that here. I actually seek out like a little butcher, a little grocer that I go and do my stuff, because I was raised like that too. I remember when I first came to North America, I was just shocked with how much stuff there was in one store. Now you got used to it, so you know. But yeah, it was a shock because we never had those kinds of stores when I was growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you walk around a supermarket, really, and you really look at the food and go, how much of this is actually food, like, edible? It's food.
Totally, I'm with you. It's so bad, and that's why we have so many more new diseases, and because of the stuff we put in our mouth, right? Because your gut is so important. People have no idea how important it is to keep the gut healthy.
Yeah,
like it's everything.
Yeah. So although we've got the time and space now to work on some of these belief systems, I think like some of the practices that our parents and grandparents had, like they had to grow their own food. They had no choice, right? They had to. So their hands were in soil all the time. The food that they were producing was real food without additives, right? So and yes, they had less of it. Like my mum was a child during the war years, so she remembers rationing and remembers not having food, and like a treat then was like a little bag of sugar with a rhubarb stick, right? And like my grandmother was raised in an orphanage, so like she had very little access to food, and as she brought up her own family, it was a struggle for her to eat sometimes. And you think, well, you know, that's only 1-2 generations past.
It's not so long ago.
It's not that long ago, right? So we're still untangling, like I'm still untangling beliefs that I discover, and I've spent a lot of time and a lot of energy on working through my own belief system and doing my own work. And I still catch myself on a daily basis going, where did that thought come from?
Yeah, I'm the same.
What was that?
I'm the same every day. It's like there's never ending. And I think that's why people, if you're listening out there, don't get down on yourself when you keep having, because it seems to be like what the mind does. It's just, you know, watch it, have compassion, and just like Marie said so beautifully, she realized that she had the power to change her mind. And that's what you have too. In every moment, you have the power to change your thinking process. So don't get down on yourself if you're still having those thoughts, because it's normal for all of us.
Yeah. And interesting, like a couple of months back, I was invited to do some work with some girls in a sweat lodge out in far north Saskatchewan somewhere. I had no idea where I was going. And in the sweat, I was handed the grandmother folds, which was kind of like, that's the work I do, the intergenerational repatterning, right? And they actually handed me the grandmother's folds to pray over the grandmothers. And in that round of the sweat, I actually had this like most profound experience of this, like, I'd thought this thought before, but it never landed so beautifully that, you know, the work that we're doing is not a burden. It's an immense privilege.
It's an honor. It's an honor. I say that every day whenever I have clients, people come to see me. It's my complete honor, because in front of my eyes, I see the transformation, and it's just like, wow, I get to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought it on many levels, but in that moment, I actually, like, I felt it
landed in your body. Because you have to go from hearing it, knowing it, to becoming it. So it has to land in your body so that you can be that. It's so different from talking about it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So feeling that sense of privilege and going, you know, like sometimes I think we can make ourselves insignificant in the work that we're doing, but yet it has an immense impact on our ancestors and our future generations and the people around us. Like every time we heal an intergenerational pattern or a thought process or a belief for ourselves, we are literally creating a ripple effect that can affect the entire world.
Exactly. And if you take on the work within yourself to clear some of the intergenerational stuff that we've carried, we also help to free our children and their children. Like you said, there's 3 generations within one person.
One body,
right? Yeah, exactly. So then the benefits are huge to do the work.
Yeah, and like I received that it gets passed down through just 7 generations, but I've heard somebody recently say 14 generations. So, you know, it's like, imagine how severe the generations 14 back were and what conditions they had to be.
And I think it's really important that we as a society become more aware of our ancestors and how we are impacted by that. And also how we then impact our children through that and their children through that. So then, doing the work is one of the most important jobs we have to do as parents.
Yeah, and I know like sharing the stories with my children, like I shared with my son one day, and he was like, why do you tell me all this stuff? Like when I'd have realizations, I'd share some appropriate things with him, and he's like, why do you do that? Like, why do you tell me all this stuff? And I said, well, I tell you so that you understand, so you understand me a little bit better and you understand yourself a little bit better. I said, but if you want me to stop, I will. And he thought about it and he went, no, I think I'd still like to know. I think I'd still like to hear. And like the things that I share with my children, I know it gives them understanding. And the things that I wish that I had access to with my grandmother, like my mom and I can share stories now, but like my grandmother passed when I was little on both sides of my family. So I crave those conversations. Like I want to sit with the elders. I want to sit with my grandparents and not just talk about the good times. Like I think our past generations are like my mother's generation has a habit of going, oh yeah, things were great, we did this and we did that and we did the other, and it's like, what about the other things? Like, what about the other things that weren't so great? Like, and not to dwell on them, but to share those stories and share those experiences. Like I hear a lot of parents going like, oh, I keep these stories to myself so that I don't harm my children. And I think it does more harm to hide
not to tell them, because sometimes children are going through problems or traumas and stresses that if they had known the background, that they would understand it better and feel less judgmental towards themselves. Because at the end of the day, like, you are part of this, like you said, this 3 or 4, 5, 7 generations of people ago. And the more information you have about them, I think the better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like when like the olden days, like the habit was to put the skeletons in the cupboard and close the cupboard and don't talk about it, right?
Because we're ashamed. We're ashamed of our darkness. We used to be.
That's what I was going to say. Like it just develops this this pattern of shame, and we can feel the stories that are hidden. And when we feel a story that's hidden and we can't see it, we go looking for it, and then we can develop a threat brain because we're always looking for the threats because we don't know where they are.
Exactly. And I think, again, with the shame and the guilt, like when parents feel that shame or guilt, they don't want to share it to the children, because also when we are very young, your parents are like the gods and you look at them like they are gods. And so parents often, they don't want to fall from that pedestal. So they keep maintaining so many facades but at the end of the day, once you grow up from being a child, from the age of 7, I guess, then it's very important to see your parents also as people, not just as mother or father that has to be a certain way for you, but they're also people. And then, whatever they had struggled with, we don't have to judge them. But if you only just see them as parents, we are so judgmental towards our parents for many things. Oh, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. But you know what? They did the one thing right, and because you are here. So often the parents don't want to share those vulnerabilities with us because they feel like they'll be judged, or you'll not look at them in the same way, or respect them or love them in the same way. That's another aspect of it.
And there can be another perspective on that, where as a child, we loop our energy around our parents, expecting them to give us the same source energy that we remember. And then when we fall short, or they fall short of our expectations of being like source, then we can feel disappointment or loss or disconnection and blame ourselves for that. Oh, well, if my mother doesn't approve of me, for example, then it means God doesn't approve of me. So we can loop that in the same bucket, because we make our parents our creators. Therefore, creator doesn't love me the way that I need to be loved.
Right. And that's why there's so much with intergenerational repatterning can be so good for you, because often there are many, many children who come into this world and the parent is just not ready to be a parent. Like maybe she was too young, maybe the father went away, maybe the mother was a drug addict, like whatever. There's lots and lots of reasons. And often that comes into the child feeling abandoned. And it doesn't matter what they do in their entire life, they never can fill that hole. Because like you said, we are stuck in the illusion that the parent has to give us that thing. But actually, as you get older, you understand that you are the source of that. You are the source of that power. You are that power. And when you understand that, then you can see, okay, my parent, maybe they couldn't do it, whatever their situation is, we don't know, but at least we can forgive and move forward.
Yeah, our parents literally didn't have access to this this higher level vibration, for want of lack of better words. It's only through the evolution of time that we now have access to this information and access to this healing. It wasn't possible. And if you think about it, like only a century ago, we were in the industrial age, and in the industrial age, like we had to be shut down to endure and survive that experience. We couldn't have survived the industrial age the way we are now. Like we are far too softened.
Nobody can make a fire anymore.
No. Like I remember,
like if you had no matches and you were in I wouldn't know how to make a fire. I say it like it's true. I don't know how to do that, but the people in the past, they had to do that.
They did, yeah. I remember I'm from a coal mining town, and I remember going to like a museum that had like a real life coal mine that you could go down the shaft in, and then they had like the ages of, this is where it was like 50 years ago, this is where it was like 100 years ago, and it wasn't that long back that 5-year-olds were put down the mine shaft as trapdoor boys, and they would just open the trapdoor when the cart came along and then close it after.
Yes.
So the 5-year-olds sitting in the pitch black, they weren't allowed to use the torch, they weren't allowed to use the fuel, listening to rats scurrying around. Like, if we didn't shut down our emotions and shut down our fears at that point, there's not a chance
you wouldn't have survived. And it's funny because you say that, because I remember when I was young, my mom used to make me do things and chores and stuff. And I have a grandson now who's going to be 8. And I always think about my grandson. I was like, there is no way I would ever get my grandson to do that.
Yeah.
So it's true. It really is true. We have definitely changed, and hopefully, for the better, and hopefully we can do better and help our future generations to be better too.
Yeah, I think our future generations are helping us to be better. I learn from my kids every single day. It's not me teaching. And I think,
but I think our parents learn from us too. So I think that's just how it goes. Yeah, exactly. Like everything I ever needed to know, of course, I learned from the people that are close to me. And if you learn the lessons there, you're good to go in the world. I think that's why we have families, because if you never had them, you would never know how to be in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Marie, I wanted to talk a little bit about your book. I know that you wrote this incredible book, and can you please tell our listeners a little bit about this? The metron.
So I was literally, this process that I went through, it was like understanding the belief at cellular memory, and then changing the thought in the mental body. So like I'm a bit of a serial learner. I can't stop myself. I'm always learning something new. So I learned about the neuro-linguistic programming. I did my practitioner's course, and then went back and did a master's the year later, and started really, really paying attention to thoughts and thought patterns and how to change them. And then realizing that the cellular information sits in our mental body, and then it's stored somewhere in our physical body. So we store this belief somewhere in our physical, and it can create an ailment in that particular part of the body. So this is how I started breaking down some of the beliefs around hypothyroidism and adrenal fatigue, because I studied what beliefs were attached to that area. And then when I started working on those beliefs, that my illness or your
symptoms
started lessening. Yeah. So it was like mental body, physical body, and then our emotional body, how we feel about the information at cellular level. We quite often forget, like I struggled quite hard going through my emotional body, because from a coal mining town, you learn not to show your emotions. It's like you just don't do that, right? So for me to actually pay attention to my emotions, and now it makes so much sense. Like emotions are a language that are more ancient than the spoken word. Yet we don't understand what this language is. We can't translate it, right? So we have to learn this language that's inside us, that's innate inside us. That one was a harder one for me. And then our spiritual body, the understanding of this belief, our internal representation, how we see ourselves, and an external external representation, how we then present ourselves to the world. And then once it's formed in this pattern, we create a story around it to make it true. And in this story, we call in things and animals and people and behaviors and experiences and objects and animals and nature and things just to come in to make this story true. And then once it's true, we just say, so it is. And then we repeat it again and again and again and again. So as I see this intentionally, it's like a spider's web. But one day I realized it wasn't a spider's web at all. It was the shape of Metatron's code, which is the sacred geometry, which means creation of all things. So once it's in this pattern, it just creates. The universe doesn't care whether it's helpful or unhelpful, only we have that judgment.
Yes, correct. That's what I'm saying, because the universe has been going for billions of years creating. It doesn't care about what you think, if you like it or don't like it. So therefore, when you become your journey towards yourself, understanding that you have the power to change any thought, any emotion, any feeling, anything that you've made up, you can change it. So when you choose to change it, the whole world will start changing, because you are actually the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, like when I was growing up, I did the same thing. I used to think everything else was more important than me. Everybody else was more important. It was always out there. When I finally took that journey within, took many years, I understood like, oh my God, I am that thing. Everything comes together within me, and therefore I get to choose. And when I do the work, and exactly actually how you explained it in your book, exactly when I understood that my choice to change my thinking, my choice to change my feeling, my choice to undo the conditioning of that first 6, 7, 8 years of my life. That's my choice. When I did that, when I got my power over that, because I have power, my whole life changed. And so literally, I know when people are in pain or in suffering, or they have trauma going on, that they feel so helpless. And exactly like Marie also was saying early on, when she was waking up, she couldn't even lift her head up. So I understand when we are in that, but there has to come a point of realization that I want to change.
Yeah.
Because if you never make that up, nothing will change. You will just keep, because creation is just creating what it thinks you want.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're putting out there.
And one of the changes for me was, instead of looking at like in the past previous to my diagnosis, I'd been looking for what was wrong with me, and I'd been misdiagnosed like by 3 different professionals with depression. And I was like, I'm not depressed. And one of the doctors said, well, if you want to take antidepressants, go see a psychiatrist. And I was like, okay. And I went to see a psychiatrist twice, and she said, Marie, you've got more positive tools than I have. And I was like, yeah, right, I'm not depressed, but what is it, right? So when I stopped looking at why I was feeling so bad, and started translating the why that can cause ruminative depression into like, what can I do? Like, how can I get better? Like, how can I figure out what this is for me? Because I knew it wasn't depression, and I was definitely not willing to take antidepressants. And if I had, then all of my symptoms would have been masked as depression and would have worsened with the antidepressants that I took.
Exactly.
So having that discovery and willingness to discover what was going on for me internally gave me that power to know. Like every religious text there is says, know thyself. And we have to know ourselves intimately to be able to make any shifts.
But because like I said, because all of us, myself included, my journey was, I always trusted everybody else. Like if anybody else said something, it's like, oh, they must be right. They must be right. It took many years before I was able to stand within my truth and say, actually, no, that might be right for you, but it's not right for me.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, and so it takes us a long time before we let go of that, because we are basically raised like that. You know, you believe everything your parents say, and then you believe everything your partners say, and you believe everything well, not so much anymore, but before, what the politicians say. After the pandemic, I don't think anybody believes anymore the politicians, but anyway, that's for another day. But you know, if you understand that you have the power to change your thinking process, and therefore you can change your life. And I like what you said when you went to see the psychiatrist, when you decided to focus on the healing instead of the problem, that increased.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's also important to know where you're putting your focus, because that will grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And taking like self-responsibility in that, and going, well, this is my journey and my responsibility, not anybody else's. And I don't know where I got the courage from to challenge the doctor that day, but it was an innate knowing in me, and there was not a chance I was going to believe that I was going to be sick for the rest of my life. Not a chance. It was like, no, I don't care who you are, what type of education you've had. It was literally like a line in the sand. You are not crossing that line. You are not going to tell me I'm going to be sick for the rest of my life, because it's not true. And I do respect the medical industry. I still get my thyroid levels tested every year, and I still go to a doctor to do that. Like, I'm not saying that the medical world doesn't have its time and place. I'm just saying that we have a choice to challenge whether we believe it's true or not.
Yeah, because ultimately, I mean, scientists have said this and proven this all the time for us, is that the body heals itself.
Yeah.
The body heals itself. So your capacity for healing comes from your thinking process.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like, and I say the same as you there. The medical profession is amazing in what it does. But I think before we just put all our trust and energy in something outside of ourselves, maybe first try what you can do. And then if you still need help, well, then it's there, right? But I think in our society, we believe so much that everybody else knows better than us that we never even trust ourselves. We just go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, like a candle in the wind, you know? And it's like, if you actually just...
Yeah, I'm not saying that I didn't do that. Of course, like I did go to like Body Talk, and I did my own work, and I actually still reach out to people outside of me, but not because I see them the expert, because I know that we collaborate well when we work together. We're not meant to be an island all on our own, yet we are still the expert of our own internal processes. And although we can go to other people for support, and please do. Like, I still have a coach that I see. I've got a supervisor that I connect with once a week, and I've got a coach that I work with, and I still have people that I work with to help hold me accountable, right? Because I'm accountable to my own journey.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good way to do it, because when you are not accountable, then you can also get lost. And also, I mean, there's a whole nother different story. There's the whole topic about when people come to you, often you feel like when you're helping other people, like sometimes the ego can step in. It's like, oh, I've done that, but actually people heal themselves, and you just have the honor and the privilege to facilitate. And then however much they are prepared to do the work, that's how the results are going to get, nothing to do with you. So, you know, that's another one to look out for when we're doing the work that we do. Just know that everybody actually really creates their own healing, and we're just there to facilitate that. And like I said, that's an honor and a privilege. Even just having a conversation with someone, I find actually now when I even just write a note, if I have something going on and I just write a note to someone, I don't even have to send it. I get my own answer without sending the message, because when you connect you to yourself, you have all the answers available to you, this way or that way.
Yeah, we do. And like, my son's got a great analogy on like staying in our own head or helping process something with somebody else. It's like, you know, it's like being in a fun house with that mirror that reflects your own image again and again and again. You just get the same image reflected to you when you stay in your own head with something again and again and again and again. Whereas when we invite somebody in, it's like inviting in another mirror with a different perspective.
Different facet.
Now we get two images, we get two perspectives, and it gives us an ability to shift into a different perspective.
See, very wise son you have. How old is he now?
19 now.
So amazing. Maria, I want to thank you so much today for joining us and helping us to understand a little bit about intergenerational trauma. And if there's anybody out here wanting to connect with Maria, I'm going to put all the information at the bottom of the podcast. And also she can send me the link for where people can get the book. The book is amazing. I have a copy too that I got from Marie signed. And yeah, it's just so wonderful to hear all the wonderful things that you're doing. And I've known Marie for so many years, and we basically have seen each other do all this stuff that we love. So it's just wonderful. Marie, thank you so much. And we will see you again soon.
Okay, it was a pleasure. Okay, thank you. Bye now.
Bye.